Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third day of the Asia-Pacific Economic Statistics Week. Just a few announcements before we start with session 5. Kindly, there has been a slight change in the program. Kindly go to page 6 of the pamphlet. Okay. Now at 2:50 to 3:20, instead of the closing of the seminar, we will have the side event on the outcome of the 10th meeting of the Advisory Expert Group on National Accounts. This will be presented by Mr. Benson Sim of UNSD. So kindly take note, at 2:50 to 3:20 will be the side event. And then following after, from 3:20 to 3:30, that would be the closing of the seminar. And then we will have the coffee break. And then for those who have been invited for the Russian Federation funded project consultation meeting, which will be on meeting room A, that will take place at 3:50. So instead of the meeting invitation that was stated as 3:40, that will be slightly delayed at 10 minutes. So it will be at 3:50. And also a few more announcements. The evaluation forms are being distributed already. So we hope that you will submit that right after the closing of the seminar. And we would appreciate if you take in all the things that would need us to probably take into consideration if we can put all your thoughts in there. And then also, you might have seen already on the Secretariat desk the UNECE Guidelines on Statistical Business Register publication. So it's like 1 copy per country. Okay? So at this point, I would like to invite Ms. Ricky Monk Hansen to do the recap of the second day of the seminar session. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome back to the third day of the seminar, and I'm very happy to see that everyone is still smiling, so that's good. Let me just put a few words in terms of our discussions yesterday to get a little flow into what we will be discussing this morning. Yesterday we continued the quality theme of the Asia-Pacific Economic Statistics Week. And in the morning, we emphasized the underlying structures and processes for quality improvements. So the morning session covered data management and classification. And the papers and the discussions were focusing on three main themes: the business processes, crucial to modernizing the production of statistics, as well as the underlying statistical infrastructure for that. And we also talked about metadata, which is really our specification on how to work with the business processes, and the classifications, where we also had a few papers were focusing on that part. It was very clear from the discussions and the presentations that changes to the business processes are very big undertakings and requires coordination within agencies, across agencies, and the questions and answers also revealed that the presented processes and improvements could not have happened without leadership and support also from top management of statistical offices. And that draws actually a line back to some of the discussions we had on Monday this week, where we looked in particular, when we talked about starting to make use of administrative data, where we looked at the importance there for long-term planning. And that's, of course, something that requires sustained support from the organizations we all work within. Some of the challenges discussed yesterday morning also relates to these issues about organizational change and the support necessary for that. And we talked about the changes, the people that have to be involved in and driving those changes. And it's very clear from that that modernization requires some mindset changes. It requires the management buy-in to be truly transformative at the organizational level. In the afternoon yesterday, we went back to a specific topic, but we were still talking about quality improvements. This session was price statistics, and we discussed several issues related to improving the quality of price statistics. We talked about the production of CPI, we talked about different price indices. We had some presentations also focusing on the use of modern technology for data collection, the use of big data sources such as online prices for groceries. And we heard about the potential for using the experiences from the ICP in the production of national and subnational CPIs. We heard the potential for reduction of costs and challenges in terms of collecting data for CPI using this experience and the results from the ICP. Now, the discussions we had on the basis of the papers attracted quite a lot of questions about the use of big data, web scraping, potential data sources for price indices. And I noticed that a lot of the discussion focused on potential drawbacks. And I think we have to make sure we also put our minds and intellects to consider the gains from change. And it relates to the comment that I made yesterday morning in terms of trying to give a few remarks on the basis of Monday's discussions, that it relates to how we respond as a statistical community to these constant calls for change, to become more adept at responding to the needs and demands of our users. Finally, yesterday we also had a side event. We had a presentation from Benson on the 2008 SNA, the impact on the GDP in some countries in the region. And Benson highlighted some of the activities by the international statistical community to assist in the implementation of the 2008 SNA. And he also pointed to some resources that are available to all of us we can use in our respective future work. So this concludes the notes from yesterday, and I think we can all look forward to this morning's session. It's a topic that has generated a lot of papers, and for me that is a reflection that there is a lot of efforts going on in different countries in the region to improve statistical business registers. So thank you for your attention, and I will hand it over to the organizer of our first session this morning. Please, the floor is yours.
Can you send the microphones there? Or now nobody knows.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll spend the entire day talking about statistical business registers, and as you know, SBR is essentially just a storage of certain type of information that can be useful for statistical purposes. When we think about SBR, we imagine a very sophisticated high-tech system, but it essentially is just a storage mechanism. It could be just a notebook or even a stone tablet. Based on that, there has been an SBR for thousands of years, starting with ancient civilizations. But the challenge in a modern environment is that the volume of information that we have to deal with. and also the complexity of information. Every piece of information is somehow interlinked with another piece of information, and also how fast an information that we have becomes outdated. So today we are here to discuss our issues in this context and how each of us, our organizations, are facing these challenges, and see if we can come up with strategies to solve current and future challenges. So to start with, we will deal with some basics, and I will do away with all the introductions. Eileen, start.
Morning, everyone. So, I'm here again. So, I hope everybody had a good rest and getting ready for a long day. I'm still waiting for my PowerPoint. So actually, this is supposed to be a very long presentation. I'm trying to scare you. But we're trying to condense it. We're trying to have it in two parts because the title of the session is anyway on fundamentals. So we thought it would be best to actually have some descriptions first, so that all throughout the day when we start discussing SBR, we are more or less on the same page. Okay, so the title of this presentation, not paper, is an integrated approach to establishing statistical business registers in Asia. So this would be the outline. So basically, I'll be focusing more on the review of concept at this stage. And the ADB SBR system, and along with the challenges and conclusions and some recommendations on the way forward, we're hoping to discuss it in a later time, maybe after Nilima. Okay, so of course, we have been discussing this since Monday, implicitly or explicitly, that a lot of NSOs are having this statistical business register, which is basically a register of enterprise establishment involved in any business activity. Now, it is closely linked to business registers, and normally it's centralized in NSOs, who draws information from this business register in accordance with international standards and frameworks. So in the Philippines, for example, they have some form of statistical business register, but they call it list of establishment. So all these things have evolved, the names have evolved, but as Joseph has rightfully pointed out, anything that has to do with a list of businesses and registers that we use for statistical purposes can be called a statistical business register. So why is it important? It is an essential part of a country's statistical infrastructure for the compilation of economic statistics, along with determination for economic censuses and regular economic surveys. It is directly related to the implementation of the recommendations of the system of national accounts. And in this particular instance, for the ADB project, we have been using and implementing the 2008 SNA to the extent possible. And it sort of brings together all this international standard classification. Also, we're trying to, in some way, integrate the guidelines for integrated economic statistics. So when we do this project, all these 5 countries that are part of the project are subscribing to the same standards, subscribing to the same classification system. And later on, we will try to describe how we sort of had this as an integrated approach. So why is SBR important? Of course, it reduces costs and time in terms of conducting pre-survey operation. That I'll have to emphasize, that if you don't have a well functioning SBR or list of establishment, there's always this issue on cost for conducting pre-survey. So when you conduct pre-survey operations, it's usually as expensive or even more expensive than the actual survey itself, because you're trying to find the establishments that were there before but are could be no longer there. So it's harder and it's very costly. So why is an SBR important? It provides a standard framework of units and their classifications. So it puts perspective as to what type of activity this business is really engaged in, or to which industry should it be classified, or is it a parent company, or is it an enterprise, is it an establishment? So all these things are being taken care of if you have a well-established SBR. Now, it's also more efficient for a single organizational unit with the NSO or NSS to maintain the SBR. Why? Because then you will have the universe. Because your SBR, as we have been discussing with five countries participating in our project, your tax bureau, okay, not everyone may be paying taxes. In countries like Cambodia, they have certain cut-offs for industry or for an establishment to be paying taxes, and yet they are registered in the Ministry of Commerce, or they have been registered in the line ministries. So if you don't have an SBR, who puts together all this and all these companies paying and not paying taxes, tax exempt and those that have to pay? So this is how we actually try to educate the stakeholders of SBR in each country. So we conduct this, what we call stakeholders meeting, which we think is very important in terms of getting their willingness to actually provide data. So what would be the role of the SBR? Basically, detection and construction of statistical units. So as I have mentioned, you may not be able, as statistical offices, you may not be able to capture everything. So you will need some administrative data, but one administrative data source may not be able to capture everything as well. Your tax bureau may be able to give you a good documentation on death, but birth is usually coming from the Ministry of Commerce or Trade Industry or line ministries. So these are all the things that are very important, and the important role that the SBR is playing in generation of economic stat. Now, it is a tool for the preparation and coordination of surveys. As I have mentioned earlier, if you have this well-established SBR, chances are you would save a lot on your pre-survey operations. In more advanced statistical countries like ABS and New Zealand, I think this approach is being used to a large extent. Now, it is a source of statistics and analysis of business population and its demography. Why? Because the variables or the content of a SBR, the questions that are contained in here, like gross revenue, turnover of sales, employment size, some of these are not really being asked in a regular business register. Okay, if a company, for example, is trying to register with the Ministry of Commerce, they go through, if their industry is into agriculture, they first go to the line ministries, agriculture, which may not be asking for for how much they're going to be employing, or how much they're going to be capitalized, how much capital are they going to be putting on. So if you don't, this type of variables or questions are being included in all the SBR, or at least in the SBR that we have been developing with these 5 countries. Now, it is a tool for mobilizing administrative sources, and I think it's quite obvious. And of course, it's a form of integration and dissemination platform. Why? Because it contains all this information that can be useful not just for statistical offices, but the aggregate report, the industry analysis, is a good form of actually advocating the uses of these statistics produced under SBR. Now, to differentiate it with a regular business register, we say that it includes a qualifier statistical for 2 reasons. One, to emphasize that the register is created for statistical purposes, and therefore, attached to that is confidentiality of information provided. The second point is it is distinguished from a register of business organization that might have been constructed for administrative purposes, and that might well be referred to as the business register. So if it's for administrative purposes, then it can, like the Ministry of Commerce, tax, line industry registrations, then there is, you would know right away that there's each of this each of this admin source would have been created with a different mandate. So the tax bureau are supposed to be looking at who pays what taxes. So and every agency has their own confidentiality clause. So how do you put these things together without violating this type of confidentiality, which we have been talking about since Monday, I think. Now, the underlying framework for the SBR that we have been developing for Asia is conceptually we are following the SNA, and it basically defines the production activities to be covered as well as the value-added concept to be measured. So sort of by the end of the SBR project, once it's operationalized, once it's operating in all these countries, they'll be able to have indicators for their estimating or proxy indicators for estimating their national accounts on a quarterly basis, for example, because they'd be able to generate all this kind of aggregate report. Then other than that, one of the conceptual framework includes the UN International Standard Classification. So we use the ISIC Rev 4, and we use the CPC. And all this, it's built in the system that we have all concordances, recognizing that not every country is already doing ISIC Rev 4. We provide in the system the concordance for ISIC Rev 3, 3.2. So, and even for concordance across classification system, from COICOP to CPC to ISIC, and even the harmonized system, the harmonized system and the trade, for the trade statistics are also included in the system. I'm not sure. Okay, what would be the relevance to stakeholders? I think I mentioned this before. So for national accounts, it's the production and value-added data as a quick indicator. For the formal sector, data are of course needed by government. For government, financial corporations, non-financial business, and non-profit institutions serving household. Now, but in this particular SBR, we are actually focusing on the non-financial corporation first. Why? Because if you recall the presentation from, I remember the face, I don't remember the country or the name. Okay, there was a presentation on financial statistics, and all these financial corporations, of course, reports, most of them would like to think, especially the banks, are reporting to the central bank. So there is already an institution which can cover this. So basically, the SBR design would have all these institutional sectors, but you can gather all this administrative data from source agency, such that you can just integrate it. So there's a template to just adopt from one system to the other or link them together. So we're focusing on non-financial corporation for two reasons. One, because they are big. Number two, because other institutional sectors are already being collected elsewhere, and therefore it may not be too hard to actually integrate it into the system. Okay. I don't want to repeat this. I think I've mentioned this before. And okay.
All right. Now let me request Nilima Lal from SPC to present her views on and insights on SBR.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ESCAP, for this, for the privilege of having this Statistics Week, and we're glad to be a part of it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just a very short presentation, but as you, all of you may have read the paper, the presentation will give you a 5-minute glimpse of setting up standard business registers in the Pacific. Now, SPC, which is the Pacific Community, we provide technical assistance to 22 member island countries in the Pacific. And as providers of that technical assistance, our focus is to strengthen economic statistics. And we are doing that under the 10-year Pacific Statistics Strategy. And to strengthen economic statistics, it was important that we looked at the business register first, because in the Pacific countries, not many had a business register. What they called a business register was a list of businesses operating in their country, and they had several of those listings. So, like, if there had been 2 divisions or 2 units, they would have 2 business registers. This one. The 2 main reasons why we needed business registers in the Pacific was to have consistent survey frames instead of the many different frames that were existing, and provide information on business demography. So the 2 reasons were simple, and we thought we'll make an easy start. So as we develop, as we strengthen the register, then it could also act as sort of like providing leading indicators. But our main intention was to keep it simple at first. Now, how we sort of like did that was to form a group, a little sort of group that could sort of assist Pacific Island countries with setting up business registers. And the collaboration was between the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the SPC. We also had the Fiji Islands Bureau of Statistics, and we had them to work as a South-South facilitator. The first thing that we did was to hold a workshop. Now, we had to make a decision on whether we wanted to include all the Pacific Island countries or we act in phases. So, due to budget constraints, we said we'll look at the larger Pacific Island countries first. And they were Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Vanuatu, Samoa, as well as Fiji. So that was the first step, and the workshop was a success. Everybody said they needed a good business register, and everybody, all who attended, said these were the variables they needed. What we did next was to look at what Australia had. So we looked at the Australian business register, and then we looked at the Fijian business register. We thought, both SPC and the ABS, that the Fiji business register was more suitable for the Pacific Island countries. It was simpler. So then we had a relook at the Fiji Bureau of Statistics. We also had the privy to look at the concept papers that were done to develop that business register. And there were certain refinements brought about to the Fijian business register. And that is where we started. We also looked at what these larger countries had, the listings they had, the type of information they had, where they sourced the information from. So there were countries with good information that could sort of like jumpstart the process. We also looked at other literature available. One was the Proceedings of the Wiesbaden Group and the OECD guides. So having having decided that we're going to do this, a decision was taken to have a standard business register, and the key word is standard and central. Central we have to use so that, like the staff in the NSOs know that there's got to be only one business register. And standard, and the reasons are very obvious. We have a lot of islands, 22 islands. They're diverse. They're spread over the Pacific Ocean, right? And the biggest being Papua New Guinea, population of 7 million, and the smallest being Tokelau and Pitcairn. So, and in SPC, there are only 2 of us. So, of course, we collaborate with other organizations, but on the business register, there was only 1 person from SPC and 1 person from Australia, and the IT platform was being facilitated by Fiji. We also were aware that the Pacific Island countries lacked skill in setting up business registers, so we would need to set it up for them, and as well as provide training. So when we started the work on the business register, we identified that there were more issues. And the biggest one was to do with the classification. Countries were using outdated classification, and that was a challenge for us. Because here we are on one project to set up the business register, and we realized that we need to do something to the classification. So we came up with the Pacific Standard Industrial Classification that was derived from ISIC 4. So that was very challenging, very time-consuming, and we had to work overtime, of course. The other thing was we had people from the larger Pacific Island countries attached to the Fiji Bureau of Statistics to have a look at their business register. Oops. So I'll be very brief with the methodology. If you've read the paper, you would have noticed this tree. So the first thing that we needed to do in setting up the business register was to create a framework, and this is our framework. It's got a lot of branches in it. As a first step, we set out the purpose and the vision. And that was necessary. So the countries needed to know why they sort of setting up the business register, why it was necessary to have a business register, and the vision. I mean, what their plans were, how they're going to progress work on it. So that was very basic, but still they needed to. And the Pacific Island countries, not all of them are very big. Some are very small. Some have only 2 people working in them. So a few of the important things in the methodology was to be very, very clear in your purpose, why you want to do it, who your user is going to be, for what purpose you're going to use it, or your users are going to use the business register, and the future. It was also important to have a dedicated person to operate the business register, so that we could provide training to that person. Of course, another person could be there, but one person who we could train, and the person could operate the business register, because it has confidentiality issues as well. Eileen has just mentioned that. Then source of the data, where to source the data from for the business register. So we said, let text be the main, because you can get a lot of information from there. But all these larger Pacific Island countries also had the registrar of companies, or some sort of a registration establishment where businesses needed to get registered to be able to operate in that particular country. So discussions were also held with those countries, with those organizations in the countries. And in a few cases, we had to draw up a memorandum of understanding. But from the tax department and from this register of companies, most of the identification variables were available and some stratification variables as well. So that was a good start, but there were other sources as well. And if you read the paper, you will see that. We also needed to profile the larger establishments. See, with the smaller Pacific Island countries and even the bigger ones, most of the establishments are profiled. But we had to make sure that in Papua New Guinea, where there are many establishments, that the larger ones did get profiled. And I've also the classification, I've mentioned about the classification. We had to do the Pacific Standard Industrial Classification, which all countries are using. They have even developed their national classifications from there. And the procedures on updating the business register, on using it as a survey frame, taking snapshots, because some surveys are done monthly, some are done quarterly. So those snapshots are necessary so that you have consistent frames for the survey. The most important was the IT platform that needed to be set. And there were 2 countries in the Pacific who had business registers, but because they did not have control on the system, there were issues. One of the countries, the BR system collapsed, and the other one, it was still there, but modifications could not be done. So we looked at the IT capability in different countries, and we said we'll use Access. So it is a system that everybody has, familiar with. It is also taught in the University of the South Pacific. So we had experts who knew the Microsoft package as well. So that is why Access has been set as the standard, but countries were free to choose other systems, more sophisticated systems as well. Now, those are the main things, but there's so many little things if you read the paper. When we finish setting up the business register, we also provide training. And documentation is very important, because no matter how much training you provide, it slips off the mind. So we ask the countries, and we work together with them to develop their national business register guide. So after that is developed, then we sign off the setting up of the business register. Let's go to the first one. It's not working. Third one. Yeah. It's fine. It's okay.
I think it's like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's next, previous.
So the findings. What we found is that the standard business register is going to work in the Pacific. It's for some countries they may need more information. They would want more information to go onto the business register. That's fine, but a standard system needs to be set up. Now, it benefits both the country and the SPC. It benefits the country because they're able to communicate with each other. And that helps us a lot as well. We are then freed of time and some time that we can use in strengthening other economic statistics. So it works both ways. In the central business register, I've already said that was important. It ensures coherence, efficiency, and functionality. It's easy to maintain. There's a standard methodology. quality is assured, provides good data for GDP, and it also develops expertise. So at least you'll have one person in the organization and maybe two with the necessary skills of maintaining a business register. And that person then can provide assistance to the smaller Pacific Island countries. And we also decided on the formal sector. Informal sector is not possible. And in the Pacific, there were concerns because they're businesses that have not been registered. They're operating, and they're operating from home. So that was a very big concern, that informal businesses should be on the business register, but it's very difficult to find them. In Fiji, they register even hawkers, so that's okay. You have addresses there. But in most of the Pacific Island countries, especially like in Papua New Guinea, it's very difficult to find informal businesses. So we said, that bit of information can be sourced from the Household Income and Expenditure Survey and Labor Force Survey. So that is why the decision was taken to have just formal sector. I know some of the countries were not happy. And the industrial classification, so we said, we strengthened that. And the use of admin data as the source was the cheapest. But what we did was also developed a business operations survey questionnaire, because sometimes, in some of the cases, not many variables were there. So then questionnaires were sent to these particular companies because their addresses were there, and data were sourced. Telephone inquiries were also made. And also to update the business register, there are certain procedures put in place within countries. And we also found that the IT system needed to be simple, so that was done. The last one is geospatial capability. Now, the larger Pacific Island countries had developed the GIS, the Geographical Classification System, for determining the enumeration areas for the population census. So it made sense to use this same classification in the business register, and so because there was sort of a demand for it. So countries were quite impressed because they could see that their business on the map now. So that was something extra that was done. The remaining issues, not all the countries in the Pacific have a BR. So what we're trying to do is now look at setting up business registers in smaller countries. But they do have a list, like Nauru is one country which has a list of businesses, but there's no business register. So in some countries, like Tokelau, not many businesses are there, just one big establishment and maybe little informal ones. Further work that needs to be done in countries where we have set up the business register is adding more variables to it. And so that the business register, we can get leading indicators from there, and also link it to the trade database. Some work had started in Fiji, but I'm not sure if they have progressed. But I think that is something that we are looking at now for the larger Pacific Island countries where we have set the BR. And the countries are also sort of asking us to split the information on employment according to gender. So that is something that probably will be looked at in the near future. So that is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilima. Okay, thank you, Nilima. At this point, I would like to ask Eileen to continue with her presentation. It's essentially a description of the initiative by ADB in this area. I think it ties in well with the theme of the morning, which is the fundamentals of SBR.
Morning again. Good morning. So now I'll try to walk you through the SBR system without actually going to the system itself. But we start with how did it come about. So we have a project under ADB, which was approved in December 2013, and target completion is until December 2017. But as early as now, I think we're thinking of actually extending the project. If we still have funds, we may be able to address some of the future works that we're planning, which is I will be presenting in later on in this presentation. Now, the basic objective is to complement ongoing initiatives of ADB's regional departments by strengthening the link between SBRs and BRs. Because we have projects, one of our departments have projects, for example, in Lao, where they have already established a BR. So now we have to make sure that those BRs can be linked somehow to the statistical business register that we're trying to build. Now, it will also ensure that information collected via business registries is optimized by NSOs, meaning all this administrative data that is already there or from admin sources can be used or integrated in their statistical business register. And the last is to contribute towards improved coordination among national agencies. So the hope is that by providing an avenue for stakeholders or data providers to discuss what can be done, what can be improved, then the statistical business register can sort of bring together all these seemingly different data sources, but which has some commonality or common grounds. So establishing the common grounds between these agencies would help in terms of advocating the support to SBR. For example, in Bhutan, they're just like in the Pacific. With this SBR project, they're starting to come up with their own national classification system, because upon discussions during stakeholders meeting, for example, they found out that each of these admin sources uses different classification systems, and one establishment is differently classified from one data source to another. So the Ministry of Commerce, for example, reports Company A under agriculture, while the Tax Bureau reports Company A under manufacturing. So when they sit together, it's actually the NSB, or the National Statistics of Bhutan, who provides the concordance or the matching of this system. So there's a mutual benefit between the stakeholders who provide data and the NSB who uses the data. So our motivation is to, because there has been increasing pressure to reduce response burden on enterprise survey. This is especially true for bigger countries like Sri Lanka, and which is also part of the project. Now, there is also a need to correct accounting of an industry's contribution in countries' macroeconomic statistics. As I have mentioned earlier, if you have that situation where you're using, for example, data from your tax bureau to come up with flash indicators on a quarterly basis or even on an annual basis, but the classification of the industry is done rather not in a more scientific manner or not in a more internationally comparable manner, then you have a problem actually on the estimates that you get for your national accounts. So basically, these are the outputs that we want to have at the end of the project. We want to develop the capacity of national statistical systems for the establishment of basic SBRs. We are developing all this standardized guide for national statistical systems on developing and improving SBR. So we train them in all aspects, when we say all aspects, it's the management of the SBR, understanding the concept, basic training on national accounts, and then the software part of it. So basically all the component needed for them to be able to sustain it even after the project is what we're trying to conduct while the project is still on. Now, then after that, as part of our support system, we were planning to set up an Asia informal network for SBR experts. Because in the region, I am not sure whether we have established this kind of group, but our hope is that these 5 countries who are part of the SBR project of the ADB will start or can be the core. So these 5 countries that we're referring to is Bhutan, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Sri Lanka. Now they're a mixture of statistically developed and less developed economies, and Malaysia is the one with the advanced statistical business register. So for each type of or for each level of statistical development, we are trying to address them in different manners. So Bhutan, Cambodia, and Laos, they still don't have the SBR. And Sri Lanka has some form of a list of establishment already. So for the 4 countries, we are developing the system. But the development of the system is benefiting from constant discussions and feedback from the countries. So we had several stakeholders meeting. We had regional workshops, we have regional stakeholders meeting. And in the regional stakeholders meeting, we don't just invite people from the National Statistics Bureau, but we make sure that the people, people from stakeholders, or basically those who would be providing the administrative data, like for tax, commerce, and the line ministries are also represented in the meetings. So that they, from the start, from the inception, they would feel inclusive. They will feel that the project is inclusive, and therefore they take ownership also of the output or the outcome of the project. Now for Malaysia, the aspect that we're looking at is profiling of large establishment already, and as well as linking their Malaysian Statistical Business Register with trade statistics. And in this particular component of the project, we are working in collaboration with the UNSD, UNDP. Is it? Okay, Marky Murayawan is from UNSD. Okay. Now, what is our implementation strategy? So sort of we having it in phases. So ADB, when we do capacity building work, we sort of do it in phases, so that everybody's on the same page first, and then you go to the when we're convinced that everybody's okay in the phase 1, then we move on to the second phase. So phase 1 is establishment of a well-functioning SBR, and under this, we develop prototype ADB SBR system. So now we're having 2 versions of the ADB SBR system. It's still being tested and constantly sent for comments to countries. But basically, the 2 types are meant to be, one is generic, meaning if you don't require local language translation, or you don't have, or you use the usual script, then you can right away use the system. But for countries like Laos or Cambodia, or countries in the Mekong region, where they have their own local language and their scripts, so or alphabet system, so we try to integrate it, and it's in the it's in the version 2 of the SBR. Then after developing this prototype ADB SBR system, we establish on a country basis. So how did we do this? By simply having an additional module. So when you go to every country, you would see one look. So it's a one look SBR system. But then there's one module that we add, a sub-module among the 5 modules, where it says country-specific or other indicators. This is to cater for other variables that the countries may feel they would need for their SBR. So we have about 50 variables included in the SBR right now. So to capture different dimensions that may be needed or that may be required for industry analysis or other macroeconomic analysis. But other than that, during the discussions, countries were really eager to add some more variables, and so we introduced that sub-module that would cater to that need. So then for every step, we provide training and meetings with NIAs and stakeholders. So when we had this first system, we presented it in Bhutan in January. So it was then that we realized that the stakeholders actually find uses for it. And now the direction that the NSB is or at least the whole of Bhutan is going, is that they might be adopting this SBR that we're developing to have a sub-module for each of these data sources. So basically, we will be deploying sub-modules or a module or part of the SBR in this source agency, so that whatever data they're gonna be producing can be automatically transferred or submitted to NSB. Of course, there's an issue of confidentiality, which they are trying to address right now by way of legal, having some legal basis for it. So phase 2 is tailor fitting the SBR. So in terms of tailor fitting the SBR, so this is a one look at the moment. Phase 1 is a one look system. But countries would want to, have their own feel of the system. So we are always saying, we are always maintaining that the ADB, just like the SPC group, are also, we are only a handful of people working on this. We have 2 programmers. We have Joseph as our project officer, and then we have one other consultant and myself. So to be able to do this, we have to have a prototype. But then after that, we train the people not just on the front end, but also on the back end. So at this stage, we're training them at phase 1. We're training them on the user side. Okay, so front end. But towards the end of the project, we're hoping to conduct before the end of this year the programming part of it, so that if they feel that they want to modify it, or they needed to change some parts of it, then they have the ability to do that. So that saves a lot of problem for us and for them. So in terms of for us, in terms of providing backstopping support, and then for them to be to have that type of ownership or feeling of ownership of the output. Okay. So another implementation strategy is that of establishing legal basis for access, if necessary, by changes in the laws. So in Sri Lanka, there have been a memorandum of understanding that has been signed by parties involved in this SBR. While confidentiality is maintained, there is some measures that are taken in order to ensure that the information are not leaked. In fact, the system is protected. Only 1 or 2 assigned administrator will have access to all information. And even if these are deployed in administrative offices, they will not still be able to get hold of information that are not theirs. What does that mean? So if Tax Bureau, for example, provided 10,000, a list of establishment and information attached to it of about 10,000, if they ask for a report on establishment, they'd only be able to access the 10,000 that they submitted. So the question is, then what's in it for the Tax Bureau? Why would they want to participate if they're not getting anything? And therein lies the importance of the aggregate indicators. Okay, aggregate indicators. By having these aggregate indicators, for example, Industry A, under the Tax Bureau, they're reporting just 100, say 100 establishment, but the SBR is showing 150. So that's a good enough information for the Tax Bureau to know that they need to go after at least 50 industries. And the information provided for in the SBR is also profiled by geography. So there's a geographic location. So it's not, are we trying to violate law? No, because no confidential information is provided. Everything is aggregate. So when this is presented to stakeholders, most of them are actually appreciating the benefits, mutual benefits to them and to the NSOs. Now, prospects beyond the ADB SBR project is an integrated data infrastructure or a development of a master plan for information sharing, the types of course and forms and list and mapping of all these variables from one data source to another has to be really carefully reviewed. And then the mechanism of maintenance and updating is very, very critical because we are all targeting for a live or statistical business register. At the moment, all countries are just working on whatever they have, because that was our at least advice. Because we are just starting the statistical business register, if the data that you can get hold of would be your own census of establishment information, then make use of that. Whatever your latest census of establishment is, that would be your starting point. While you are working on your right hand to discuss with your data sources. So first establish your SBR, and then the ultimate goal is to have a live one. And that you can only achieve if you have proper coordination with your source agencies or those that are providing administrative data. Thank you.
At the moment, may I request Marco from ESCAP to provide his insights into the paper?
Okay, Joseph, thank you. Let me be very brief because I think the most interesting bit of this session is listening to the countries, and that's actually the most interesting thing about the SBR is the national implementation, because many countries have been facing with different issues on national implementation, and that is much more relevant for the others. And I hope we can, as you know, as outcome of this, there are several papers from countries, and there's also, you know, there can be feedback, there can be case studies how national implementation happens wrapped up afterwards, and I think that could help really the implementation and support projects. But just to put this in place, I mean, I really enjoyed. I really think that both of these two presentations show the value of this regional program. The regional program on economic statistics is obviously not an ESCAP program, but it's a country's program that's implemented and designed by the countries in coordination with the partners, with the international partners like ADB and SPC that contribute to the implementation of this program. And these two projects really show that how also international community works together in supporting countries to help them in this particular topic of business registers. I wanted to mention the standardization. I think we all understand the value of business registers by now. But I think it's also important, and I'm very happy to as Nixie announced in the morning, that there's a guideline on SBRs developed by UNECE, and we have copies for you all here. I think that provides a really good standardization and definition of all these aspects. And I'm also pleased that, you know, all these initiatives under SPC, and they've developed their own manual, are really aligned with the other ones. So I don't think you know, these things are mutually exclusive, and I think they're really supporting each other. So that's a very good achievement. And my last point, I think, would be on we need to really think of how can we use these tools, and I think Eileen mentioned, you know, it's a piece of infrastructure that helps us, you know, in the service and different things. It also helps us in coordination on a national level because of integrating of different administrative registers. But we also need to think of how can we use them for different purposes, and I'm really looking forward for the presentation of Malaysia today in the afternoon about linking into this to trade statistics. So we really need to think of how can we actually use these business registers and infrastructure not only to produce statistics but also to support policymakers in their efforts. So very brief comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. So we'll have time for questions a bit later. So let's start with Indonesia and Pakistan. May I invite Indonesia and Pakistan to come up? Or you can present from where you are. So our next presentation is from Lian, who works for the statistical office in Indonesia.
Morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Before my presentation, let me suggest with my team going to the this seminar to the try and explain how the SBR in Indonesian experience. Our title of the harmonization and integration of the internal data sources in constructing statistical business register in initial data in BPS Statistik Indonesia. We know is Statistik Indonesia is BPS, called is BPS, is non-ministerial government and institutional in Indonesia that directly responsible to the president. One of the BPS mission to the provide quality statistical data, truth and integrated statistics by implementing national and international standard, and BPS provide a range of statistics of government and communities. In BPS, for economic statistic production, BPS organizationally consists of 16 sub-directorates, which each sub-directorate work on statistics production for particular industrial sector called is subject matter areas. Every subject matter area may have businesses directories maintained separately based on industry. In addition to census the data, businesses directories are used as a basis to generate the survey frame. That causing the problem. What is problem? The problem like duplication, lack of survey coordination, and then BPS has no maximized yet until now the use of the secondary data for producing timely statistics. BPS difficulties to measure respondent burden in the surveys. In 2013, we have not have a special unit on ad hoc and dedicated team. We call this statistical business register. Before we namely is integrated business register. We started to integrate existing businesses directories into single register for all industry and use of primary and secondary data as SBR initial data. Okay. What is research question and scope of study? research question is how we construct SBR initial data by utilizing internal data sources. Why? Because until now BPS have SBR SBR development to date. The preparation of the SBR initial data is one of important aspect to consider. Initial data is useful to get whole picture economic unit in Indonesia recorded in BPS internal data sources that are available. SBR has a role to consolidate and integrate the businesses directories that used to be silo by integrating those the directories into the single integrated frame. And so process of the preparing each data before the merging process is called the harmonization process. Harmonization process is also cover the process on maintaining the quality data. On this month, on May, BPS is doing 2016 economic census that will be cover a complete and compulsory enumeration all of economic unit Indonesia, and BPS and HBR determine this is in economic census is determined SBR development milestone. I think scope of study. The SBR initial data constructing process including data harmonization and data integration, which has been done in period 2013 and 2016. The study cover businesses with large business scale for all industry. Next, methodology. Methodology, we conduct two methodology. One is how the data we get to the harmonize, called is data harmonization. And the two is we call this data integration. Data harmonization consists of how the statistical unit we conduct to the same perception, the same proposes, and get the reference of the SNA and reference to the ISIC revisi 4. Okay, the statistic data harmonization consists of statistical unit, classification, and we conduct the geographic location code and variable. This statistical unit. Statistical unit is entity about this, which information is sought and for which statistics are ultimately compiled. BPS SBR support their three-level hierarchy of statistical unit: enterprise group, enterprise, and establishment. They use statistical unit based on 2000 SNA for international comparability, provide national account as the end user. Better approach for data collection. Also, for harmonization process, we conduct this statistical classification. SBR determine the uses of the industrial classification based on ISIC revisi 4, that namely is Indonesia is KBLI. In 2015 we have news version, yeah, KBLI revisi on the same ISIC revisi 4. But the ISIC KBLA, it is a new version. We conduct to the prepare the economic census in this year in years. Yeah. The use of the sum reference to the end period of master village file and master census block in SBR. Mandatory field is set to province and district level for harmonization process. Based on SBR processes variable need to be defined to include the information must be recorded. The use of the same variable for comparability. And next, the methodology in data integration. What we have done, we have the data gathering and matching and profiling. Data gathering, what is data gathering? Data gathering is a process is acquiring data from internal data sources that available, uploading the data into the SBR database using SBR system. We have built a system myself to build the SBR. We make a system SQL Microsoft. Yeah, the BPS internal data source used for SBR. R is economic census 2006 data from profiling exploring data from the subject matter directories and regional administrative data updating preparation. The data uploading process is done using SBR system with data validation and duplicate detection facility. For is successfully entered in its database, the system automatically provide them with a unique ID. We call it SBR ID. Matching. The matching, what is matching? Matching is the process is done by comparing the SBR data with other data sources. All data from gathering result is stored in database on separate table. It will result as the amount of data duplicate in duplicate to remove. Yeah, the matching process is carried out using the SBR system by liaison officer. What is profiling? Profiling is methodology for analyzing the structure of the legal operation and accounting of the group of companies of national and global. Profiling is developed to build statistical unit in group, how the relationship with other companies within the group, and find mass efficiency structure to collect the data. Okay, finding until now is BPS and SBR has a total number of unit 1.90 billion unit, which has derived from subject matter area directories, from profiling exploration data result, from economic census 2006 done, and 2016 economic census updating preparation regional administrative data. And then SBR data was used to produce the pre-filled, we call the pre-filled form to conduct the economic census 2016. And then 45,000 and unit and list frame on economic census until 997,000. And then also this finding the harmonization process needs to be done repeatedly and not easy work in order to ensure the statistical consistent and coherent data. Remaining issues and further research. Remaining issues, it is reconciliation in count of businesses from subject matter area compared to SBR because of harmonization. I think this reconciliation is important. Why? Because reconciliation makes make sure to the accurate and consistent between different sources. And then further research how the elaborate SBR data with economic census 2016 data. Subject matter areas are still that administrasi data has a better quality than 2000 economic census, then 2016 economic census, and subject matter area directories, the uses economic census 2016 data has basis for SBR will political encourage and subject matter area is trust in SBR coverage and gradually move to administrative data. And then for the research, we use the SBR initial data as a quality benchmark to select administrative data. Yeah, this is I think it is enough. Thank you very much for thank you very much for your attention, and don't hesitate if any question SBR team from Indonesia can answer deeply. Thank you.
Thank you, Lian. Let me now request Dr. John to share Pakistan's experience with SBR.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Business register has been discussed in detail for the last 2 days, and particularly today, early in the morning and in the 3 presentation. The detail has been discussed and everything has been covered, I think. Nothing left for me to say in that way. But I would present myself as a case study. Because I've been involved with the business register since its origination in Pakistan. Think about a country with the multiple issues, with the huge population of 200 million, and then so-called security issues as well. And then the arranging such activities in which each and everybody can come to share their income and their income processes, their industrial productions and the industrial income, how much difficult it would be. As everybody discussed, that a survey frame, the minimum, the survey frame is required for economic activities. And these survey frames, another way, is list of businesses, or you may call it register, or in nowadays business register in the modern, with the modern taxonomy, to be kept current, ensure comprehensive and non-duplicative coverage, and to provide means for data integrating. As usual, the people is defining. In Pakistan, business register, there was kind of list of large-scale manufacturing industries, but that was very limited before 2010. We conducted a census of manufacturing industry in 2005-6. For that, the list was only limited to 9,000 industrial units. And within that 9,000 industrial units, only 4,000, almost 50% have responded, less than 50%. The question was that whether such a big country has that much industries. So the expectation was very, very high that no, we must have around 50 to 100,000 list of industry we should have. So the idea of business register came there, and this was a challenging task, that how to improve our list of industries. We had list from the Provincial Directorate of Industries is usually listing the industries at provincial level. The Federal Board of Revenue Department, Tax Department, is another way, just collecting taxes and registering the industries for taxes. And there is another registration department which we call SECP, Security Exchange Commission of Pakistan. So that is registering when a new business comes in, then they are just giving application to them to be registered to start work. As I said, we restricted our format of business register only to large-scale manufacturing industries. And first of all, we tried to get the information from these three big sources, administrative sources. We got a little bit information from SECP and from tax department, and then from Provincial Directorate of Industries. But it was very strange that we accumulated them, merged all these lists together, and then we check them for duplication. So we found that out of the tax department had about 17,000 industries in its tax category. The SECP had 14,000 industries registered, and the Provincial Directorate cumulatively had only about 9,000 industries. And all those industries were those which we had a listing or frame for our CMI. Then we merged them and we looked to this information. We found that the industries registered with tax department is only 4,000 of them are overlapping with the SECP. The rest, 12,000 industries of tax department are even not registered with the SECP. That is the basic registration. And 10,000 of the SECP registered industries were not registered for taxes, had no tax number. And these were the large manufacturing industries. I'm telling about this. So Now, the issue came whether all these industries, because there is no proper birth and death registration of the industries, right? There was no proper processes. So what we did, we planned another CMI, Census of Manufacturing Industry, in 2010-11. These cumulative figure came from these three sources was almost 38,000, removing the overlapping duplication. And we sent these 38,000 lists to the field to conduct census of manufacturing industries. In the field, almost 12,000 industries, some of them were with tax department, or some of them were with the SECP registered. All of them, these industries, 12,000 of them, were closed. Nobody knew that these industries still exist, though the reserved plots were there, the reserved areas were there. In almost 25,000 industries, with the questionnaire we send on the address, they received the questionnaire. But in those 25,000 industries, we got a response of only 8,000 industries. There were other issues in the industries. We pointed out some activity. I mean, industry was registered for some activities, then it was shifted to another activity, or even somewhere in residential, for residential purpose. So again, there was a big issue of this, and the Bureau, Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, winded up the census of manufacturing industry, and we start rethinking for the purpose that how to get these industries in place and in a list. So we started rethinking and exploring new sources of data, that how to get it, and then we got other sources. So the first three, Provincial Directorate of Industry was the initial source, Federal Board of Revenue Tax Department, second source, SECP, third source, Exchange Commission of Pakistan, and other sources were the commercial user of sui gas. We have two companies, Swiss Northern Gas Company and Swiss Southern Gas Company. One is providing gas connection to the northern part, and another is southern part of Pakistan. So they are usually providing connection on commercial basis and residential basis. So we tried to get the commercial connection list. EOBI, Old Age Benefit Organization, institutions. We also, because every industry has to be registered with EOBI as well for old age benefit. Another, National Electric Power Regulatory Authority, NEPRA. Every commercial unit has to use, I even not started, okay. I hope you will bear me because it's a case study, so you will bear me for a long time. Anyhow, these new sources from different aspects we collected them and we got their information, and we found without NEPRA, keep it aside, the other information were almost 100,000 listing of manufacturing and non-manufacturing activities. And also if we included the NEPRA, because everybody has to use the electricity, right? The commercial units, and they have to pay the bill. So the address would be confirmed because the billing address. So we got the commercial units from the NEPRA, and the list is almost 5 million commercial units in Pakistan. Then our model of business register model is basically one window solution model, in which the minimum information we were interested. The classification and all these things comes secondary. First, if you have the industrial list. So what we did, business register model, mean all these sources are providing the data, feeding the business register from one way, and if the business register is established, well in place, then the information, the minimum information will be shared with these pro and back way with these sources as well, so that they can update their tax listing or SCCP listing or other listing as well. The business register functionality was designed in this way that first the sources data will be matched together and removing the duplicacy. There will be matched records and unmatched records. All of them will be put into the drum of business register. And then what we did for the earlier and we will be doing onward, the ISAC code and geographic code and CPC code and business register own code will be allotted to all these units. And after that, the output, the results, will be coming out as business frames and business statistics. Business frame for census and surveys, and business statistics will be produced on the basis of activities and regions and employment, date of registration, and many more. So the main component of this presentation, which is business register complication. What were the complications we faced? The earlier story is the big complication that we were not getting, but now looking to all these administrative records, what we have complications as in this way, different aims and objectives. I mean, each administrative record has their own objectives, their own aims. So the PBS has only the statistical objective. So every administrative record has not that much information which statistical record needs. Different identities, identifiers. Tax registration has their own identifiers, the other has their own identifiers. Those will be there in future as well. But the statistical system, we have our own identifiers. And those identifiers for statistical purpose will be in the shape of ISAC coding or CPC coding, and mainly the BR coding which we call business, a unique code will be assigned to all these listings. So the concordance will be looked of each and every identifier with the business register code. Then there is a conceptual difference. The Bureau of Statistics, for statistical purposes, looking to the industries or looking to the companies in the shape of enterprises or establishment, and then in the shape of value addition to the economy. While other administrative sources are just looking to the tax information, so that whether it is from the lower unit or it is from the upper unit, they don't distinguish them, but tax and their own, for example, the electricity people are only looking to the commercialization of these units. Then different classification system. PBS is using ISAC and CPC classification and standard classification in their local version, while all other administrative administrative organizations are not looking to it in any way of either they have no classification or they have some old kind of classification of their own use. And then an effective capacity building, non-updated lists. The industry is registered in 1980. After that, there is no record whether the registration number is there, but nobody knows where is the. Then non-cooperation, lack of coordination, and all these were the issues, main issues from the business register side. So to all these, we were set together as a team and we were thinking what to do. So a solution came in our mind that we have to go for solution because it's our national interest. Since we have 5 million records, about 5 million records of commercial use of electricity, so one can expect that there will be even manufacturing or non-manufacturing, but commercial. Both can come in the business register. So next we are planning to have an economic census. I proposed it, and if it is approved, then economic census may be conducted on more than 5 million records of electricity consuming establishment because their addresses are accurate. They are paying monthly bills. So we would also involve their employees, DESCO employees, who is collecting the bill, distributing the bills and collecting the bills, so only for addresses, that they can lead us to particular address, right? So they will be involved as a helper, and we will conduct economic census. So wherever is the electricity use, there will be an economic activity, there will be a business activity. So one thing is that. And the information can be utilized to update. This is not only for business register, the economic census is for the other purpose as well in the country, but particularly keeping in mind the business register, we will update our business register as well. Because the last economic census we conducted in 2001-2, so the economic census is also almost due. So there is a dire need of cooperation among different department sources because the administrative departments are not cooperating. How we get these lists from them, it's a very terrible task. Pursuing them, asking even the ministers that please help us. The parallel organization is not giving us the information or the lists because every organization has their own limitations and their own way of considerations. So we requested the ministers to the higher levels and then involving the two ministers of different, for example, industrial minister and a finance minister, to meet them and to resolve the issue, to get, so we get the information at the limited, for limited variables. So cooperation is needed. And we propose the one window solution for that cooperation. That if we should share the limited information, at least, both sides will be benefited. The administrative departments will see, for example, if we collect the information for 5 million records, then do you know the Pakistan tax department, what I expect, the taxes ratio, which is almost 9% of GDP, will be pushed up to 25%. Or, I mean, this is just expectation, maybe exaggeration, but not that much. Because the tax department will have the range of 10 times more registration of the industries. Similarly, SECP, Security Exchange Commission of Pakistan, they will get a lot of out of this. So this one window solution, and one window solution means if a person is coming to register himself for the tax, for example, a newcomer is coming to the tax department that, okay, I want to get a tax number, then the minimum record, that address, this, put it on this page, will be shared, incorporated in the website, and that will be distributed, that will be ultimately goes to the links. The link will be business register, the link will be SECP, but the link will be with business register. After business register, it will be moving towards other, for their respective use. So, similarly, if a person comes to registration department and he gives his information, that limited information, that will come to the business register drum and then will be pushed for respective use to other administrative sources. So this will help all the administrative departments to keep their list updated. And we also have a regular, we would have a regular system of birth and registration that once in a year, every registered unit has to respond for 1, 2, 3 questions. Paid taxes, yes, no. Exist, yes, no. These kind of limited questions. So if he can, the unit is responding, then we will know that yes, the unit is there. and as such the birth system as well. Now, for organization, we need capacity building of different organization, administrative organization, because their capacity has to be built to know the basic information and how they have to accommodate all these systems in their respective environment. And for donor organization, I would also request that our international community and international organization, they have to look the country's individual situation, because every country has their own story. It is difficult to understand while sitting on one table, 5, 6 countries, and people say that we are supporting these 5 countries on one table. So it's difficult because every country has its own story, and their solution will be there on their table, respective table. If the donor organization or international community goes to their office, their table, and their respective countries and see all these complications and then design a strategy for their solution, it would be more realistic and implementable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jan. 15 minutes break. Please be back by 11:05. Thank you.
Okay, just a few announcements, just one quick one. At lunchtime today, as you may know, FAO is hosting a side event. So during lunchtime, the side event today, FAO will present their work on 2 new macroeconomic statistics databases. The first is on agricultural capital stock and related statistics pertaining to the agriculture, forestry, and fisheries sector of ISEC. The second is a database on agro-industry measurement, which is a topic that has evoked interest recently, particularly in this region. So the presentation will describe the approach, data sources, methodology, results, and contents of these 2 databases. And FAO is particularly keen in obtaining your feedback and suggestions for refinements before they disseminate the databases. So in order to take this work forward, FAO welcomes country proposals for collaboration. So lunch will be served to participants during the side event, and the presentation is being held in the public foyer downstairs. The public foyer is the one close to the coffee shop on the ground floor. Thank you. So it's just a 15-minute break today. Thank you.
Okay. That's good. That's okay. Yeah. you know, that tomorrow we will start our steering group meeting, then lots of preparation I need to discuss about that, and that's why, yeah. Okay.
Go ahead with Alan. If I'm
Good.
here,
Okay.
the whole money can be seen.
Excuse me. How about the next session?
Oh, hi.
Ya küçük değil, bunu da sen götür. Siz de
So let's just wait for the others, maybe in another 2 minutes. How about the other? It's okay, I'll just introduce you as you from your office.
We should introduce our office.
Yeah, you can. I'd prefer that you introduce yourself. Is that okay with you?
Yes,
I think that's better so that you can say something. Okay. Is that okay with you? Okay. So, what do you want? Let's have 5 minutes now? Or 5 minutes is never 5 minutes. So I'm giving you 10 minutes.
10.
Is that fair?
Maximum 10.
Okay.
Up to 10.
Is that fair? Before I even announce? If you want 12, that's fine also. But not more than 12, huh?
Close to 10, yeah.
Okay? Okay. That's okay with you? Okay. Once again, good morning, everyone. So after that very comprehensive lecture or discussions this morning, let's continue with some more on statistical business register and looking at country cases in Iran, Mongolia, and Vietnam. So the same procedure that we're gonna have, but realizing that people would really want to say more because people are really enthusiastic when you start asking them about when they present things that they are proud of. And I'm sure our presenter right now would be very proud to share their experiences on SBR. And I'm sure all of us, myself included, would eagerly await to learn from them so that our own projects and the projects that we are working with 500 countries can benefit from it as well. So, before we start, I'd like to say a little bit on the modeling of a role that we follow in the ADB SBR system. And I believe this is something that can be, that is being followed in some ways by most countries who are implementing the SBR. So when we model this role, so we define what an SBR is. We know what SBR is. So first, when we develop the system, we identify what would be the uses of each features. It has to have a role. Otherwise, why would it be in the system, right? We must know what would be the performance of the system. So in the case of SPC, for example, they have smaller data sets, so maybe an access is good enough, an MS access is good enough. But in the case of Sri Lanka, when we discuss with them, they have like thousands and even millions of data and data points. So a more sophisticated data is required. So, and then the environment, okay? In the case of Bhutan, where they don't have surveys and censuses, the environment calls for the integration of administrative data sources. And they already have that environment, which may not be applicable to some countries. And this is actually one of the concerns that was raised by our dear gentleman from Pakistan regarding this ADB initiative on 5 countries. Suffice to say that this is the modeling role that we're doing. So it's not like it's a one-size-fits-all for everybody. We completely agree with that. So the model is you have a prototype, but you study the needs and discuss with your users. So that's why if you look at the model, you have inputs, you have the role of the system, and then you have a purpose. So the inputs will always be coming from data or information. What would be your rules? What would be the legislation required to be able to get to that level where you will serve your purpose? What would be your infrastructure or tooling? What would be your user needs? And how many staff would you be requiring to be able to deliver the outputs that you are committing down at the end of the line? So all these are built in whenever ADB or at least our department or our division are conducting capacity building work. Because this kind of model, or you can say this is a business model in some ways, this kind of model ensures that all parties involved in a project is being considered. So otherwise, if you don't follow a certain rule or certain model in implementing any system or any project, if it's just donor-driven, then it's bound to fail. So And another thing that we want to probably mention, okay, in an SBR, basically this is where we all want to go. Why are we talking about this administrative data since Monday? Because at the end of the day, we all want to go live. This is our ultimate goal. For a statistical business register to be a live register. I'm borrowing this from CBS. It's a presentation that they made sometime back in 2012 or 2011. So the ultimate goal is to have an SBR live register. And we all know that for us to have that, we have to really partner with our administrative data sources. Without the agency's cooperation, we never be able to reach that SBR live register. So when we talk about the project of ADB, for example, and SPC, we're all talking about the starting point, where you utilize whatever is available in the country, or in the NSO in particular. Then you move forward, just like what's going on now in Malaysia. They're moving forward. Now they're having the Ministry of Commerce, which will be explained by Malaysia later on. And then they're also trying to extend it for other uses, which is now in this section. If you see the coherent SBR framework, okay, this guarantees coherence because if every one of this statistical agency that is part of an SBR project is using the international classification standards, okay, or is adopting the SNA framework, chances are we will all not be having will be less burden in terms of having this SBR global data exchange program. Because anyway, we're living in a world where everybody is connected. So, but at the onset, we must consider doing a standard approach, especially in terms of concept. But practice, whatever is happening in the country, is always country specific. But the standards in terms of classification systems and SNE must always be considered, at least in developing an SBR. So with that, I want to give the floor to our presenter. The first one would be from Iran. And this time we'll be giving them not 5 minutes. We discuss about it. So maximum of 10, or at least try to keep it at 10. And then if there are questions in the floor, I suggest that you write them down, and we'll entertain the questions at the end of the 3 presentations, if that's okay with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Alien. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Said Fayyaz from Statistical Center of Iran, and I have working in industrial and manufacturing industries department from 2012. This is a great time to present my paper on strategic planning for improving the statistical register systems of manufacturing industries, MI in abbreviation, in Iran. First, I focus on a research question and scope of the study. The main question we have been faced with is what are the basic register systems, register-based systems toward IM in Iran, how IM data sources can link, what challenges are there in integration data sources of IM in Iran, what are the main opportunities and threats which result are obtained from previous experience of data linkage, and how register base of IM can improve. But our methodology to answer this question is review the previous experiences of Iran as well as the other countries in this field, provide an strategic planning for improvement, determine the existing data sources of IM and measure their qualities, provide standards for administrative registers that prepare IM data sources, try to make classic strategic planning, I mean SWOT, by SCI to make improvement strategies. The next one is focusing on integration of different IM data sources. And the last one is conduct supplementary surveys to integration, IM's data sources, and statistical framework. In Iran, different experiences have been done by SCI to update his statistical framework or manufacturing establishments. As you all know, Ministry of Industry, Mine and Trade in all countries have a largest framework and list of manufacturing establishments. So SCI have been done an agreement between Ministry MIM and SCI in abbreviation, and the result shown in this graph. As seen in this graph, the total manufacturing establishments for MIM is approximately 65,000, but for SCI is near to 20,000. SCI divided the manufacturing establishment in 4 categories: 10 worker and plus, working between the 50 to 99, and working between 10 to 49. The other graph showed that in common manufacturing establishment between 2 databases, and because there is no unique code in 2 different databases, we had very problems to linkage data and use different primary keys like postal code, name of manufacturing establishments, ID of owners, and etc. As you see, there are differences between the 2 databases, and we couldn't track many of manufacturing establishments in the 2 of databases. Another database adaptation between the SCI and Ministry of Power Energy Power Ministry has been done, and as you see in the graph, the number of records in Energy Power Ministry for manufacturing establishments are approximately 124,000. Permitted records approximately 60,000. Industrial permission record 46,000. Repeated ID number 38,000, and recorded with the unique ID is near 86,000. And we got surprised by the linkage, because only approximately 46% of databases have been linked successfully. The other graphs show the other results which obtained from this linkage. SCI also have done different linkage between the post office company, Iranian National Task Administration, INTA, Security and Exchange Organization as well. But as you know, with no unique ID and primary key between the different databases, the results were poor quality. Based on classic model of strategic planning, SWOT. Different strategies for SCI have been proposed. But before I explain the strategies, I want to present a lot of weaknesses and threats which we have been faced. Some of them are burden response, weaknesses, burden response and high expenditure in conventional surveys, quality deficiency of missing or incomplete data, lack of accurate postal code as a primary key for items in databases to upgrade or define new variables. The last manufacturing establishment census was held in 2002, and budget limitation of SCI is another problem. Unstructured total information system and integrated databases in SCI. Difficulties in linkage between the one variable to multiple variables in the different data sources and vice versa. And lack of powerful supplementary rules of SCI. This is some of the weaknesses of SCIs. But threats: lack of standard definitions in different databases, lack of enough human resources, long-term plan to complete, and there is no business unit code in the different databases. But our strategies, as you see in this slide, for SCS strategies, equalization of definition as far as possible to harmonize the database's structure, defining a standard business unit code, BUC, identification of variables and technical character addition process and mechanism, in collaboration with the administrative registers, create unified databases. In the side of W strategies, to motivate post company to make postal code address as an official address to cover postal code of manufacturing establishment, enhance the level of cooperation with administrative offices to complete the postal code coverage, determination of the data obtaining methods from databases, online, offline, web services, centralized databases, etc. And define Iranian National Task Administration Register as a fundamental register for manufacturing establishments. In WT strategies, construct teamwork with component of other organization to purify databases with in common definitions and classification. Conduct conjoint project for complemented databases and missing data. Conduct educational course system for industrial related experts. And because of a limitation in time, I just say the importance one. In SO strategies, to elaborate level of cooperation with other organizations based on the governmental position and protection rules of CI. Capacity building is very important. Create a linkage between databases, at least 5 databases every year. And the last slide is further researchers of SCI. And how SCIs can provide rules to integrate different administrative data sources. What is the best structure of a BUC code for manufacturing industries? and how administrative data can upgrade data sources without changing standards of data source. How SCI can provide infrastructure to receive data directly from manufacturing industries. Which standards are there for data security, and what are the methods of linkage data sources from one records to multiple records and vice versa. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Let's give him a round of applause. Pam? So all questions, you'll have to remember your questions, write them down, so that we can continue the discussions. Because some of the questions may be applicable for everyone. Please, Pam.
Thank you. So my name is Phạm Quang Vinh. I'm from the General Statistical Office of Vietnam. So I have been working for GSO for more than 30 years. But most of that time, I am responsible for agriculture statistics. And in recent years, I also responsible for survey of enterprise. So my presentation today, I would like to share with you some experience of Vietnam in using of business register and tax data for official statistics in Vietnam. So I could say that the using of the business register data and tax data for official statistics in Vietnam could be divided into period or phase. The phase one, from the year 2002 to year 2015, and in this phase, we mostly limited to the identify information. And the second phase is from 2015 up to now. So we extend or expand the system to connect with more information from text data. I skip this slide. So the first, now I would like to present the first phase. So the business database for the statistic, we call it BDS. So it's the same meaning with FBR. Here we build and update it from since 2002, and normally we update with from 3 data sources. The first one from the tax register data is from the tax office. The second one from the business register data. This register from the Ministry of Planning and Investment. And the third one, the third source here is comes from the enterprise survey result data. This conduct every year by GSO. So do you know that the 3 source here is different? I think different on in matching. The first one on classification, and different in the scope. So that's why metadata is required to make harmonization here. And there are 3 sources here. To link it, we have to use a tag code to link. We can use it as a key, primary key to link the 3 data sources. The business database for statistics, BDS here will provide newly identified information of all enterprise and brands, such as the information on business activity, the information on location, information on contract, information on capita and information on employee, information on birth, death, and temporary closed enterprise. So with this information, so BDS will provide the sampling for all sample survey related to enterprise. So from the period from 2002 and 2015 here, the main purpose of BDS here is help us to prepare the list of all enterprise, and then we provide us for provide the sampling for all sample survey. But for the next period, we are not limited to the information of identify information, but we connect open to the information of tech, more tech information. So the next period is from 2015 up to now. It's using tech data for official statistics. Do you know in Vietnam, the statistical law is approved in the 2003, and last year the law have revised and approved by the National Assembly. So in this law, it's clearly stipulated that the administrative data should be used for the static purpose, including the administrative data on human being, on land use, on the taxation, on the customer, on the insurance, and on the economic establishment, and etc. So it's very stated clearly in the law. So it's very easy for us when we access and using and exploring using the administrative record. And also in the law, it also states that the office of statistics could be exploring and using the administrative for statistical purpose. And also it states that the agency have to obligate to provide administrative data for the statistical purpose. So for the tech data here, up to now, the tech data is cover more than 90% of the enterprise and brands. So it means that about 500,000 enterprise and 100,000 brands. So about the information here, the tech data, so including the information on the value-added tax, business income tax, and balance sheet and financial reports. You know, from November 1915, the tax data is a manual copy from tax office to GSO. However, the tax data has large volume and being updated monthly. So to update the data on time and need to be applied IT application, and data is shared automatically between GSO and tax office. And now GSO and tax office are planning to develop a transfer data system, and expected the system will be completed in December this year. Do you know, when we are using the tax data for official statistics here, we face several problems. The first one is a data format. A tax data format is different with statistical data formats. So GSO have to change the format of data before using. And the second one, the tax data is submitted to by enterprise with many types of enterprise, which is following different financial reporting regime. So data is need to be recalculated to the same concept and category. And the third one problem is we are the officers, statistic office, very pay much attention to the classification of economy, but the tax office, I think, don't pay much attention to the economic classification. They don't care about that. So it's a problem when we I think combine between the data from tax for our purpose. So for using tax data now is that start. I think we are just start from November. So we are just starting time. So now we are studying on some. The first one is how to combine with the enterprise survey result, and the second is how to identify which indicator, statistical indicator can be calculated by this data. And the next one is to develop a methodology to conduct enterprise sample survey following the local units. Last one, the finding. The first one is by using text data for statistics, the sampling frame will be available to conduct a sample survey to the local unit, and then we can calculate GDP by province. And the second benefit is we reduce the respondent burden, because here we are some indicator we collect from the text data, so we reduce and cut some question in the questionnaire. The third one, the benefit here, we will save the cost in the survey related to enterprise, because we reduce the question, and also the sample size also reduce, so the cost will be reduced. And some recommendation for using business register data and check data. And the first one is have to develop administrative data sharing policy. This is a very important one. We in Vietnam, we have a memory note between the GSO and tech office about sharing the information. Of course, before that, it is also very important that it stipulates in the law about the obligation, about the right to accept, to using, and to providing. I think it's also important. The second one is using international and national standard concept and classification. And the third one is apply IT application to update data on time. That's all for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam, for that very efficient and comprehensive presentation. And now let's listen to Bayarma from Mongolia.
Good morning. My name is Bayarma. I am working on National Registration and Statistical Office of Mongolia. I present you about statistical business register and research question is why business register is important. Business register is one of priority area for building statistical infrastructure and support to collect economic data and production of economic statistics. And also, Mongolia needs to improve data quality on statistical business register. And scope of study, this paper describes how to reduce manual updating and how to align databases and exchange data of the government agencies. Mongolia conducted enterprise census in 1991, 1994, and 1998, 2006, and 2011, and last one this year, 2016. By statistical law, we conducted every 5 years enterprise survey, a census. And based on 1998 census, we established, created this business register. We have also main administrative data. We have good relationship with Ministry of Taxation, Tax Office, and Ministry of Finance, and other ministries. From 1998 to 2013, we step by step improved our business register, and in 2013, under Mondstadt project, we developed a complex software. It's Hogerend system of, we call it Hogerend system of statistical business register, and this software can be solved two main problems. Reduce manual editing, adding, and also convert administrative data to statistical business register. What we, in result, this software give us, we have opportunity to profiler or user to create desired tables and list of units, and makes it convenient to share and exchange information across statistical systems, and improved business register data quality. This is general scheme of how we convert administrative data to statistical business register. First column, it's like raw data, for example, from tax office, and we prepare a temporal database, which is data flow from raw data and to business register. About findings, we have better qualified database for statistical business register and mechanism to exchange data between government agencies. Using other agencies' data for statistical purpose allow opportunity to improve quality of sampling frame, and also reduce respondent burdens and save cost of enterprise survey. And there are strong demand to develop IT application to update administrative data on time. We have also remaining issues. Large number of inactive units in a statistical business register. More than 40% of total number of establishments are inactive. And there are some difficulties to collect data, because sometimes this address of some enterprises is uncertain, and it's difficult to make contact and find. In the beginning of this year, our structure, organizational structure is changed, and National Registration Office and the National Statistical Office integrated in one office, and we now have good chance, and we managed to manage our business register, because in the National Registration Office we have three main registers: civil registration and legal entity registration and property registration. And our statistical business register, we improved or improved by using this legal entity registration. Our future research is improve the data exchange. We have many this registration system, and using address database linked all these registrations.
give her and the rest of the presenters a big round of applause. So now, thank you for being very efficient with your time, and I thought all your presentations are very comprehensive, and I found some common issues that you're facing right now. So you may be working on a different areas, and progressing differently, but there are common concerns and issues that you're still struggling with, and I guess this is true not just for these three presenters today, but probably for most countries. And basically, we have concerns on harmonization. And when we talk about harmonization, we're talking about harmonizing not just the data from one source to the other, but we're also talking about harmonization of standard classification system from international to national. So that's 2 points. And then along the same line, there's an issue of what and how to assign unique codes, which will be the code that will be carried on by an establishment as long as it's in the SBR system. And the second is, I think this is very important, is access to information. So in Vietnam, we saw how it was presented that, you know, if you have this enabling law, if you have this enabling law, you have more of this flexibility to adjust for classifications and to do something about this data exchange program, which I'm not sure if that is present in the other two countries. But despite this enabling law, there's still this issue of data exchange in terms of the difficulty imposed by the systems or the format that is currently implemented in all these different agencies. So while the law helps in terms of accessing the data, that's solving probably 70% of the problem. For me, it's already solved almost 70%. Because you only need to work on establishing a platform or an interface to connect one data from the other. I make it sound simple because I thought, you know, having a legislation, having a law that would that is really the most difficult part of all these issues, because that's something that we cannot control. But in terms of developing an interface, okay, linking one file to the other, we are more advanced now in terms of technology. And as Vietnam has pointed out in his presentation, Mr. Pham, it would only take them until December to do this kind of progress in terms of data exchange. Now, I think my question is more for still along this line. In terms of the data, once you've harmonized your data, assuming that there is a way to actually harmonize the data between two agencies, there is a saying that, you know, sometimes less is more and more is less. Because if you have less information or less data, then you will have all this caveat in your data system where you will say, you know, access to such and such data cannot be done, and therefore my analysis and my data set only contains this. But here is a case for Iran where you have a lot of these data sources, and Vietnam limited it to only 3. Now my question is, if you have an establishment that's appearing everywhere else and they have conflicting data, or they have conflicting information, say for employment, or they have conflicting information for turnovers, how do you determine either hierarchically which data to take? I mean, which would you be considering as the actual data that you would be factoring in your macroeconomic indicators? So do you have that kind of system in place where you say, okay, if source A is present, then we take this. If tax is present, we take this. If tax is not there, what's the second best choice? So I mean, I'd like to understand that, because from the floor, our our participant from India raised the same question, which to me is merits some clarification from the floor. Thank you. That's the first question that I think it's true for all. And if others would want to fill in and give their views or experiences towards this, doing this hierarchical approach for determining which data source to honor, please feel free to raise your hand. We'll be happy to accommodate you in the floor. Please.
Thank you. For Vietnam's case, when we use the business register data and tax data, and to combine with our data, they are conflicting. The first about the number of of enterprise and brands. It's, normally, the data come from the business register data, the highest one, and second tax data, and then the data come from the statistical office is the lowest. So there's some reason. The first one for the business register, normally they not up to date the dead one. That's a new one is okay, but the dead one, they normally now it's okay. Update now it's okay, but in the past time, many enterprise, I think, stop operation, but it's not going to the register. So it's a very normally high rate. And for the tax data, normally one enterprise want to stop working, so they have to take time for procedure. Normally, in some case, it takes 1 year. So even in the lead, they still have the enterprise in the tax data, but in actually they, I think, didn't stop working anymore. So I think that's it's a conflicting about. The first one is for number. So the second about, I think, about the turnover, as you mentioned, now we are just on the starting point. So we have to now we just look at the data format and data how to use it, and we haven't compared between the turnover and between the GSO and the tax office. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that because of SCI and in Iran's manufacturing establishments having any business unit code, the exchange databases is a big challenge. So SCI these days conduct a survey to manufacturing establishments and receive them different identification code for different databases. For example, electricity identification code, the number of workers, the situation, active or inactive, or maybe some of establishments doesn't continue the manufacturing, and they change the activities, and this type of activities is not classified in a manufacturing category. So by this way, SCI tried to provide a comprehensive identification code to exchange databases easily between SCI database and, for example, Ministry of Industry, Mine, Ministry of Energy, and also there is a very big challenges in this way. Another solution which have been proposed by SCI to other organizations is to have a specific format for databases which has a three sector. The first sector is the mandatory codes. For example, postal codes, BUC code, other. The second section is the basic information of a manufacturing establishment, and this third one is the optional variables for their own needs. So we try to provide infrastructures to change databases and link data as far as possible. Thank you.
For Mongolia, from legal registration office, we find new enterprises. And we sent this list of enterprises to local statistical offices. They filled the questionnaire related to all this questionnaire by the business register questions. And we have two type of data sources. One is official statistics. So we have quarterly business register questionnaire. And also we use annual enterprise survey, which from this enterprise survey we update business register by number of employment and sales, salaries, and this related data. And administrative data, we also from tax office have a quarterly and annual databases. And from quarterly databases, we update these enterprises have activity or not activity, updated like this way. And from annual data, we update this sales and capital, fixed capital data.
Just follow up, no, because I'm a little confused as to did I get it correctly, Ms. Bayar? Like because you're having a quarterly enterprise survey, you're considering your estimates to be that is derived from the quarterly to be the official one, and you're only taking the tax quarterly information for updating the list of establishment. Is that how it is? Because I think for all three of you, basically my question relates to what if you're given three data sets. Okay, you're given three data sets for the same establishment, say company A, reporting in the they are, because it is a big company, it's likely to be covered in your quarterly survey, likely to be covered by tax, and likely to be covered by a line ministry. Now, their report, and you found their data to be different. Chances are it's the tax bureau that be having lowest, and then the line ministry, because they need the approval, could be higher. And then the quarterly survey, because it's for they thought you can be more trusted, and you're supposed to be not biased. You could be somewhere in the middle, but I'm not sure. So my question is, when you're faced with this kind of situation, is there a way for you to actually link all these estimates? Do you do some adjustment and calculation, or do you have a hierarchy as to what to take as an official number?
If we have from three sources, three data, this official one is first.
So it's the survey data. Yeah. It's the survey data. No adjustments required. That's for Mongolia.
No.
Okay. How about in Iran?
Big manufacturing industries publish their financial statement for security and exchange organizations because of the stakeholders. So my base information of the big companies are the financial statement, and if the other databases have a different data, we base the financial statement base and then add the others supplementary from the others to this base. But for medium and small establishments, also there are challenges in life, and we try to we try to match this information and decide about the conflicts case by case. Thank you.
For Vietnam, so the first one to dealing with different number of enterprise from three sources. So first of all, we have to look at the three lists and to find out which one is in the three lists, and then we exclude it, and then we find out which enterprise in the one or two list, and you have to use for the local office to check again the list, find out which one is I think now is a real one. So that is for the number of enterprise. If different, we have to deal with like that. But for other information, I think normally we have to follow the GSO data. But if different, quite different, we have to, especially for the big one, we have to, I think we have to go down to check again, double check, and after that we can make adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your clarification, because the reason why this is, I think this is a very important consideration is because all of you mentioned about quality, that the SBR should be containing a quality statistics and quality numbers, such that it can be really used for macroeconomic, and people would be convinced that the results is something that can be acceptable to policymakers. Because the SBR is supposed to provide quick estimates. So that's basically the main use of this of establishing an SBR. And as you heard from them, they have different ways of actually determining which is the final estimate. Mongolia is definitely taking the surveys, and Iran has a way of checking it with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and of course Vietnam has a way of actually going down to the grassroots and investigating at a much lower level. Suffice to say that I think this is an example of a best practice in terms of establishing or starting a statistical business register. And if you have any other questions on the floor, we're now ready to entertain. Otherwise, Jingy? Is there any other clarifications or points? Yes, Jeff.
Thank you. I've been waiting to ask questions for about 3 hours. Thank you. I think I've got quite a number of observations here, but I think I want to challenge your statement you've just made. You're saying that the Statistical Business Register, one of its main purposes is to produce quick macroeconomic statistics. Well, I don't think it is. A statistical business register is a statistical business register, and if you're wanting to run, it's the basis of the populations and running the surveys from it. And that's why I didn't quite understand where your question was coming from for the panel, because it seemed to me that was more of a quality control issue with the subsequent surveys rather than the statistical business register. And so that's an observation. So I'd like to go back to my questions if I can. And do you mind if I direct a question at your session this morning? Yeah. This is an observation which I worry about with our own New Zealand business register as well, whether or not we give business registers too much of a production bias. So when we look at the variables that we have on our statistical business registers, they're very much focused at value-added measurement, production measurement, and I think you had in one of your slides the production boundary and value added. So I'm not saying it shouldn't be there. It's obviously critical for our value added surveys, but what we're finding is that while we've got the businesses, all the businesses on the register, the value added flag or variable is not the variable we want for some of our other types of surveys that might be more to do with finance and balance sheet and foreign investment and things like that. And this is becoming more and more important as we get globalization and as we get more and more complex structures through financing. And it seems to me that we need to be thinking about the flags or the variables that we have in our business registers, because we're using our business registers to sort our populations for our surveys or our statistics, and we want to make sure that we've got the appropriate ones for the appropriate use. And a focus on value added, and in our case we don't use value, we have an employment indicator as a proxy for value added, but it's quite inappropriate when it comes to wanting to survey, say, holding companies where they will not employ people or they'll have very few employees, but they're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars of investments and assets, and that's what we want to know about. And the same with things like mutual funds and superannuation funds, which may be administered by one person, but the person is handling a portfolio of $1 billion. Now we want to know about the $1 billion, not about the person. So I think there's a tendency, and I can understand why, to have a somewhat of a production bias in our business registers, but I guess it's just an observation and a plea to maybe we should need to think about some other indicators that we need if we're going to make maximum use of that business register. The other observation is, and maybe it goes back to your first point, it did seem to me this seemed to be what I would call a coverage creep coming in here with what the content we put into our business registers. There seems to be in the number of presentations this desire to put lots more economic variables onto our business register to make them as though we can use the business register then as a statistical database in its own right over and above business demography, over and above business relationships. So we wanted to use it for employment statistics and turnover statistics and so on. It may be the way you want to go, I don't know. My observation would be to keep your business register as sparse as possible with what you want on it, and you link it, you set up other databases for these two things, and you link it to your business register to it. So your business register focuses on these business relationships, these statistical unit and the collection unit relationships, and you don't clutter it up with all of your economic variables. That's done quite separately. That's just an observation. There are different ways of doing things, and I fully appreciate that. And my final point, because I don't want to dominate the questions here, I wonder if an element of pragmatism needs to come into these some of these business register exercises. I mean, my colleague here from Pakistan, I mean, we just don't have those sorts of issues, and so I'm somewhat reluctant to even suggest anything. But I wonder if what I gathered from most of the presentations where you were trying to bring together multiple lists. In one case, I think Indonesia was bringing together 13 lists, and someone else was bringing 5 lists together. I can understand why you would be doing this to get that initial snapshot business register set up. But I do wonder if, on one hand, we're trying to almost get exhaustiveness in our business register to the point where we get bogged down in the small units. And would we be better off to say, look, let's make sure we've got 90%, say, of our units correct, because they're probably going to account for 99%. It could even be 80% of the units will account for 99% of the activity that's going on in the economy. And they are the units which we want to make sure we've got the statistical unit structures right. They are the units that we want to make sure we've got the relationships with the collection units correct. And we've got this probably non-employing small units below it, which we acknowledge are not, we're not measuring correct, we may not be enumerating them correctly, but at the moment, where we are at the moment, we're not going to worry about them. Because I would sooner have a business register that is capturing and measuring well these larger units, which might account for 95% of your economy, and having them updated properly. There's an awful lot of focus has been on establishing that initial grand business register, as opposed to how do we now go about updating it and keeping it up to date. And I would sooner see us updating a smaller register that might account for most of our businesses, and with more focus on the updating sources than worrying about the comprehensiveness of it. Again, a personal observation, I'm not suggesting you follow it, but I think some pragmatism at times might want to come in here.
Okay. Any other points before I respond, or shall I respond before your question? Because we're really running out of time. I thought we were supposed to end at 12:30. So we still have 10 minutes. So I think because there's a lot of questions, can I respond? Okay. Uh, if I can just respond to the questions, so, or at least react. So you are right. I agree with you completely that the main purpose of the SBR is really for survey frame determination. Now, and the reason why I've been bringing up the quality issue is because it has evolved actually, at least in what we envisage the statistical business register that we're establishing with the countries, and per consultation with them, we listen to the country's demand, and that's why even this morning I even mentioned that while we are having just a core indicator, they even want more in the SBR. And because we want to use this as a platform for them to have these quick indicators, snapshot for macroeconomic indicators, especially that's why the quality becomes very very important at that stage. So let me correct myself and say that let's not forget that the SBR is basically the primary purposes for survey frame determination. Now, in terms of focus on production side, so at the moment that's really the starting point that we could get. But perhaps if there's any recommendation from the UNECE handbook, which we have been referring to for this project, maybe we can start talking and discussing about it, because right now I think in all the references that I've read, really it's the focus is more on the production side of it. Now, and yes, it would be very interesting to have all these investments and assets in as a focus or as a new area to develop or improve the SBR. Now, and that leads me to my clarification on having these economic variables. We initially were about to start with just, I didn't have time in the morning, but the variables are categorized into information variables. We call it the categories of variable, where you have one for identification, one for profiling, one for we have all these 5 categories which you can look up to in our C-cube. But basically the expansion of the economic variables came from demand from the stakeholders that are part of our project. Now, in terms of exhaustiveness of the starting point on the list of establishment, let me reiterate that our recommendations to countries would be to first start with whatever they have. Because aiming for more, that's when I say less could be more and more could be less. Because I'm sure when every country developed their survey frame or when they started doing the census of economic census, there was a sound basis for covering all those establishments. So having that as a starting point for the list of establishment is good enough for me as a starting point. Coming from zero and being in that situation is a very good accomplishment. Now, then you go to the issue of updating, and that's where the question of birth and death and which administrative data sources you're supposed to tap if you want to capture birth, if you want to capture death. So I guess most countries here are still focused on, having all this list together. To me, I share the same view as you, Jeff, that I think it's better to have one first, make it really good, and then you move forward. Okay. Any other clarification from Mr. SPC? Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. All the excellent presentations. I really enjoyed this session. And I would like to share my concerns or thoughts from the point of view of agriculture sector. I was particularly happy to hear the word agriculture once when Mr. Win said that he also worked in agriculture sector. For me, agriculture is also an economic sector, and the agricultural holding that we say, they are also defined as enterprise or establishments. And in many, many countries, agriculture sector is also covered in enterprise surveys. Like for Georgia, I know because there are lots of incorporated agriculture, and the trend now is that many countries the contract farming is coming up. So the holdings are getting registered as companies. So what is our strategy to capture that kind of thing? Traditionally, no, I have been hearing this argument, no, because agriculture is largely household oriented, so we are not covering them in the business registers. But I think we need to look at that very carefully, uh, particularly because agriculture is a sector where the linkage between economic, social, and the environmental variables is very, very strong. So I'm also interested in the statistical business registers because this is the greatest challenge that we are facing in agriculture sector to carry out the current surveys. And there is a need for some register. It could be part of the statistical business register. It could be linked to that. Is very much, this kind of need is very much. I was just wondering whether you people were also considering using other surveys like agricultural census to prepare or update the statistical business register. I don't know the exact shape, but this is something to be considered. And I have one question. Like there was a point mentioned by SPC in implementing statistical business register in Fiji. They said that Fiji wanted to include very, very small holdings. So is there some guidelines or on the thresholds on scale of the operation that these units will be included in the statistical business registers, other will be excluded? And the second point to ponder is, have you ever thought about establishing some link with national statistical business registers with the farm registries and the land registries that may be existing in the countries? It could, and as a source, the tax may not be the only source, tax registers. There could be also, if we are extending it to cover the agriculture sector also, there could also be the list of farmers who are receiving support from government in the form of subsidies or some benefits. And why I'm raising this point, because in Fiji, I know that the minister is very keen to establish a list of farmers. Now, there may be farmers who are also engaged in agro-processing. Now, agro-processing is an economic sector. So how do we establish, how do we clarify? So these are the points to be thought of when we implement that agriculture sector could also be a potential user of statistical business register, and what are their needs? What are they looking for? Thank you very much.
Yeah, if I may just say one in probably two words, two sentences. Like, the SBR is supposed to be comprehensive and covers all of the institutional sectors and covers all of the economic activity and industries. Now, but in particular for the ADB project, we're trying to focus more on the non-financial corporation. I think I explained this earlier, for because it could be a little more tricky to include the household or the government, but although government and financial statistics are already there. Now, coming to that, if for example in the Philippines, and they do include agriculture in their annual survey of Philippine business and industry. If it's significantly big, it can be captured. But I don't know with other countries. I guess this is a question that is more for countries to respond to and for countries to be challenged. So, but strictly speaking, the SBR should be comprehensive, that it would include all these concerns and all these industries that you have raised. So, is there any other question? Can we discuss this bilaterally, because we only have 1 minute and I think I'll have to close the session. I'm really sorry, Mr. Cambodia, but we can discuss. I think they would be open for your question, and I think a lot of people here are very, very well Yes, Marco?
Sorry, Aline. I think I'll suggest to take some more questions after the lunch because
Sure.
this session continues later on. So,
Okay.
colleague from Cambodia and other colleagues, save your questions.
Okay.
There's another hour to go.
Okay then. Okay then. So think about a question, but not too hard, Okay. Okay. So have a good lunch, and we'll go to the side session now.
For those who are interested to attend the FAO side event, my colleague is going to flash where the location of the public foyer is.
I think I forgot to thank the presenter was very good, but then they'll be coming back for your questions anyway. But for now, please take a break. Thank you, thank you.
Okay, you might have seen where we take our coffee break. There's like staircase. So just go down below. And then right close to the post office, there's like a door. So go into that. That's where the public foyer is. If you're interested to attend the FAO side event. Thank you. Please be back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for the continuation of session 5. Thank you.
So they refused. Exactly the same question. Yeah, they refused. The numerator has the full page of questionnaire, right? Yes. And they had only